thank you for joining us here today at Fair Talk by Fair Farms. My name is Amanda Higgins. Today I'm joined by our special guest, Pia Piggott, Research Analyst at Rabobank. Pia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Amanda.
Excellent. Pia, you've been a Research Analyst at Rabobank for 2 years now, and a couple of projects that you've working on have been within the avocado industry and in the wine industry.
Yes.
We had a little bit of a chat about the oversupply and glut to those two markets and a recent update on the avocado report. Would you like to give us a little snippet of what that looks like?
Oversupply is definitely a theme that I cover a lot in the agricultural industry. Avocados, in Australia at least, they've been going through quite an expansion phase. So many hectares of growth, many hectares of planting, are reaching maturity. This year alone, an additional 1,500 hectares of avocado plantings are maturing.
Wow.
So that's really leading to pressure on the supply chain. We're seeing that prices are really low at the moment they are, and they've been on a steady decline for the past 5 years.
Good for the consumer.
Yes, very good for consumers and very good for avocado toast lovers. But for producers, it has caused a lot of margin pressure, and it's been a really difficult industry to be in. So we are seeing actually in some regions older trees being taken out. But at the same time, there still is a lot of plantings yet to mature. So for the next few years, we're set to see increases in production.
Yeah, gosh, even more so than what we've had. There'll be more supply coming into the market.
Yes, definitely, and that's going to
Wow.
definitely put continued pressure on prices. We export avocados as well to countries in Southeast Asia like Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, recently Thailand and India as well. So that's positive.
That's a fantastic market you know, to be able to supply into those markets.
But we don't have market access in China, which is also a really large market. And hopefully we'll see growth in some of these markets, but for some of them, for example, Singapore, we already export the majority of avocados there. So 80–90% of the avocados in Singapore are already Australian, so there's less room to grow.
Yeah, okay, that's a tricky one, isn't it? And we know that the wine industry has been suffering also for a very long time. We know that China's lifted the bans on and some tariffs, which is fantastic, but is that going to alleviate the problem in the immediate future?
Yeah, unfortunately not. We've seen that, one, the tariffs impacted supply and caused that oversupply, as well as record production and the COVID pandemic era of shipping and logistics difficulties also contributed. And so now that the tariff has lifted, which is really positive, we expect to see some growth back to China. However, it's not going to be enough to take the oversupply that we currently have in storage. It's over 2 billion litres. So really significant amount of wine in storage in Australia, or 875 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that, because I can picture that, whereas 2 billion litres is huge.
So that is, it's a really significant amount of wine, and we don't expect that oversupply to be removed anytime soon. It will take
it's not going to happen overnight,
at least 2 years for that market to rebalance.
So do you think that wine growers out there at the moment should just hold off on harvesting, or do they have to remove, or is that industry going to consolidate? What are some of your thoughts around that?
We expect to see a consolidation of the industry. It's a really difficult time, particularly for bulk wine regions, so areas like the Riverland and however, cool climate wines have done really well as well. So great prices in cool climate. So areas in Victoria particularly have actually done a lot better. So prices of them have improved. So it's a really mixed market as well. Red grapes have fallen a lot more than white grapes as well. So it's also depending on variety mix.
And is that bringing down the consumer pricing on those bottles of wine at the bottle shop?
Unfortunately not. We've seen some, we haven't seen inflation as of such. We've seen just more so stable wine prices in the retailers.
Yeah, okay, all right. So no major drops on that one just yet.
Yeah, in Australia at least. I know there is a lot of discounting happening in other countries around the world.
Yeah, good. And your most recent project is something which is really interesting, which has been developing this thing called a world vegetable map.
Yeah, so at Rabobank we put together trade maps and on different agricultural commodities, and this year we put together a vegetable map, which was really exciting, looking at what's happening in the trade space for vegetables, because vegetables actually aren't traded that much between countries. Only 7% of global vegetable production is actually traded.
Oh, wow.
And that's actually less so in Australia. Only 4.3% of Australia's vegetable production is actually exported.
Yeah.
So quite a very small amount, but it was still really interesting to look at the map, and yeah, you can find it online or we can open it up.
Yeah, wonderful.
But yeah, some really interesting trends.
So what are some of your insights from that? What does that look like? What advice have we
Yeah.
got for veggie growers in Australia, or you know, is it a positive outlook, or what do we? What's the future
definitely.
hold?
Yeah, well, we're seeing one major trend that we're seeing is that production is growing, but at a really slow rate, about 1.2% a year, whereas trade is growing faster at about 3%. So that's double the rate. And we're also seeing more so trade hotspots emerge because vegetables are perishable. It is difficult and costly to travel or to freight and carry these vegetables across distances. So we're seeing that, well, Australia does some trade, particularly with Southeast Asia, but we don't expect that really to grow much. Where we are seeing trade grow is in North America with the US and Mexico,
Okay.
in the European Union and other countries in say North Africa and around Europe, and then also in
Are
Asia.
they taking our veggies though?
So in Australia, most of the exports are more so towards Southeast Asia.
Okay. Because of that transit time, I imagine, and
Yeah,
it being
it's
perishable,
definitely-
you want the quality to be able to.
Yeah, and we'd have to probably air freight a lot of our vegetables, and that's really expensive. So
Yes, okay.
it doesn't always make sense. So most vegetable industries are very domestic market focused, which is a little bit different to the rest of horticulture. Say fruits and tree nuts actually have a lot higher rates of exports and trade.
Yeah. Okay. So the veggies, we need to look at how we can either develop some closer markets who would like to take some vegetables off us, or look at being able to increase our consumption
Unfortunately,
inside.
where we are located, that makes it really difficult.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, exactly right. So in some of the data that you've had come through from that veggie map, you've had some insights which say the vegetables in my salads, they got much more expensive. The quality, supply and prices of the veggies that I need are highly volatile. Do you see that as going to be a consistent trend moving forward?
Yeah, so in Australia over the past, since 2015, so I think that's 8 years now, vegetable inflation has only been about 12%.
So what does that mean?
Yeah, so-
Vegetable inflation.
Yeah, so the prices of the accumulative price of vegetables is at 12%. Whereas if you compare to the US, the US is 12% and Australia is 16%. Sorry.
So we're
That
higher
was
than the US.
Yes, we're higher than the US, but we're a lot lower than the EU. In that same period, about 8 years, the EU vegetables have gone up 51%.
Yeah, my gosh, so that's super expensive to eat well over there.
It has gone up a lot more than in the US and Australia, but that mainly comes down to what happened in 2022 with the energy crisis. A lot of vegetables grown in the EU are using greenhouse production, and that requires a lot more energy, and so that really affected vegetable prices there particularly.
Yeah, sure. So their input costs were so much higher because of that crisis.
Yeah.
Do you have any data whether that affected their consumption over there? I imagine
that definitely did affect consumption, and what we're seeing in Australia actually is that on a per capita basis, consumption and availability has actually declined, because since 2017 and 2023, we actually produce the exact same volume of vegetables, about 3.5 million tonnes, and in that over that same period, we've gained an extra 2.2 million people. So
our consumption's declined
on a per capita basis.
Yeah.
We're consuming less big vegetables like tomatoes, onions, carrots. The only ones we've seen actual growth rates in are lettuce, leafy salad vegetables, and cauliflower.
I find that phenomenal, considering we had lettuces being sold at $10.
Yeah.
I would have thought that they would have been one of the major lines to have declined.
That was definitely a very short-term
Absolutely,
impact.
but tomatoes, onions and carrots have declined.
And they're the largest ones we consume on a per capita basis.
Is that right?
As well.
Yeah, so we've had a change in our taste buds with what it is that we're eating over the last while.
Yeah, and more so that, we're also buying less volume, more value. So for example, for tomatoes, there's many different varieties of tomatoes now. There's all little cherry
Tom
ones,
Thumbs, cherries.
Tiny ones. And so, going from the more generic, basic, is that the
Gourmet,
right word?
Truss and Roma.
Gourmet,
Yep, the
Truss and
traditional
Roma
ones.
words.
Yep.
Yeah, and then moving into the higher value ones.
Yeah,
like
gosh.
cherry
So the
tomatoes.
more varieties that are out there, but even so, we're going higher value in the varietals,
Yes.
but a slight decline.
Yeah, and that, overall has led to that slight decline.
And so you were telling me earlier that onions are a really popular vegetable, like one of the most
Yes.
popular vegetables in the world.
Yeah, so if the global production was a salad, say, it would be made of 16% tomatoes, 8% onions, or 9% onions, and about 8% cucumbers.
Wow.
So the global salad is actually much more like a Greek salad. And it's a really interesting trend. We're also seeing that there's a lot of preserved tomatoes being sent around the world, particularly from Italy. China leads in preserved vegetable exports, but in terms of just tomatoes, that's really led by Italy, which is, of course, the home for pasta sauce.
Yeah, of course. Wonderful, yum passata. So are you seeing much change in the way product is grown in the way of glass houses or greenhouses or something like that, where it's a bit more of a protected cropping environment? And is that having an impact on supply?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that in Australia and globally. So our map contains updated stats on that. And what we've seen that we did this map or similar map in 2018 with the same look and data, and we found that actually in that same time, so about 5 years, glasshouse production glasshouse area has grown by about 10% a year.
Yeah,
so that's really significant.
Compounding, that's huge.
Particularly considering that production is only growing 1.2% per year. So we're moving more towards controlled agricultural environments. And we're seeing this in countries like Mexico. So Mexico imports a lot of vegetable seeds from the US, and then they produce those in glass houses, such as tomatoes, cucumbers, bell peppers or capsicums. And then they're
some of my favourite things.
Yeah, and then they're re-exporting those products to the US. So there's a really close-knit cyclical relationship there.
Why is that? Why are the US not producing themselves? Why are they not building the glass
so we've
houses?
actually seen that in the US, vegetable production has declined over the past 5 years. Similarly, in the European Union, there's been declines in production, and that is for a lot of reasons, but part of the reason is costs of labour. So labour costs are much cheaper in Mexico, and so we have that relationship where one sends the seeds and one sends the vegetables.
Yeah, got you. So we won't even go into the social compliance and ethical side of the labour if we're talking in that space, because, you know, we do know that labour costs is a huge component of any kind of production. Unless you're totally mechanised, you're relying on your people to be there and do the job.
Definitely. And for vegetables particularly, or
Absolutely.
horticulture in particular.
Hand harvesting, yeah.
It's a lot of hand harvesting.
Exactly, it sure is. So what other insights have you come up in this World Vegetable Map? What else is, what's coming on in the future horizon for Australia?
Yeah, well, so in terms of looking at what's happening in Australia, we know that there hasn't been much growth in production. And on the consumption side, there hasn't been growth in consumption at all. There's been declines in consumption, which is, not great to hear. The ABS data recently was released that showed, there was about a 7% decline in vegetable consumption year on year in like grams per day.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah, so I think that's really a challenge that Australia has to, work towards improving. What's more positive more recently is the latest inflation data, which does show deflation in vegetables, which isn't great for producers, and there's definitely pressure on margins there, but hopefully those lower prices help consumption, particularly in this cost of living crisis.
It's a bit of a double-edged sword, that one, isn't it? You know, the producers aren't getting as much for their product, but at the same time, when the price is high, consumers aren't buying, or there's a decrease in their purchasing habits. Do you think that there's a direct correlation, though? Do you think people, we know that you and I had a chat earlier on with the tax-3 cuts, as you mentioned, and that sort of stuff, with there perhaps being, do you see people increasing consumption of their fresh fruit and veg? Is there going to be some drivers, or what sort of stimulus can we get into the marketplace to have people eating more fruit and vegetable?
So on a consumer foods outlook, we're looking at that quite closely, and what we've seen is that demand in the consumer food space and retail turnover has really bottomed out in Australia, and growth has been really low in that area, but also just overall the economy, the economic growth in Australia has slowed quite dramatically, and what we're expecting is that in the second half of 2024 we'll start to see that growth pick up, and that's really based on higher disposable incomes. So as you said, the tax-3 stage cuts, increases to the minimum wage, also the latest budget announcements about energy relief and increases to rental assistance. All of those.
You think they'll all be drivers?
Yeah, they will all be drivers to higher disposable incomes, which should be drivers to higher consumption, not just in vegetables, but hopefully across the board.
Yeah, well, let's hope it goes into the fruit and veggie space, right?
Yes,
rather
definitely.
Than televisions and stuff, in
Hopefully.
my opinion. We eat more fruit and veg.
Eating more fruit and veg, that's definitely a really big priority.
It is a massive priority. I think it has so much of a wide-reaching impact, you know, whether it be on healthcare and all of those sorts of things, that there's some long-term forecasts that, you know, we've really got to perhaps change our eating habits and embrace more good quality produce in our diets.
Yeah, something else in the map that was really interesting is that seasonality is still a really important factor to consumption. While we have year-round availability for many vegetables nowadays, if you look on Google Trends for different fruits and vegetables and the like, you'll actually find that searches for these vegetables are quite seasonal. So we've done this for on the map in mushrooms in the European Union, and also recently I did this for pumpkins and cucumbers and some other vegetables in Australia, and you can see very distinct patterns in seasonality of these searches. So despite the fact that for cucumbers you can buy them year round, of course the price does differentiate year round, but for the whole there is availability year round. Despite that, seasonality in the
people want to buy them in summer.
Consumers do want to buy them in summer, which does really pair well with that eating moment and the seasonality of those occasions.
Interesting, very interesting. So what were your top 3 insights, do you think, that you'd like to share with our viewers as to what came out of the research within that World Vegetable Map?
Yeah, definitely.
How can Australia do better?
I definitely think one of the major trends is that trade is growing faster than production, and that is coming from low-cost countries are producing more, and high-cost countries are producing less. I think that's another trend. And then, another interesting trend really is on the availability side, and we're seeing how in Australia that for a lot of vegetables, that's actually declined.
Yeah, that's a shame. So what advice do you have to our vegetable growers out there?
I don't provide advice, unfortunately. But it's a challenging market at the moment. We've seen some relief with fertiliser prices this year, which has been positive, and energy prices, but in terms of getting consumption up, that should hopefully provide some positive outlook for the second half of this year.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. Pia, thank you so much for joining us today here at Fair Talk by Fair Farms. Really appreciate you coming in and spending some time with us. To all of you who have joined us online, we'd like to thank you very much too, and we look forward to you joining us at our next episode. Bye for now.
Australia.